to this episode 151 of the Navigating Now Virtual Roundtable Series. I am Anthony Ewing, CEO, co-founder here at Thoughttium, and I am with an incredible friend, guest, and Navigating Now community member, Paige Galster. We're going to be talking with Paige today about all things leadership. We're also going to be introducing a term on this series that we call embodied leadership. And we're going to be doing some defining of this term. It's starting to make its way into our corporate vernacular. It's definitely making its way into our conversations here at Thoughttium. And we thought that no better person to begin this conversation than with Paige Galster. Paige is the head of sales operations and enablement at Stork Club. She is, maybe even more importantly, a close friend of mine and the entire team here at Thoughttium. And Paige is a perennial guest on the Navigating Now network. So Paige, say hello. Good to see you again.
Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to spend this time with you, Anthony, and kind of chop it up and talk about what embodied leadership actually means to me, to you, to everyone.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I just want to acknowledge, it's so great to be at the table with you. You and I have a quite a special relationship. We've supported each other through the ins and outs of our career. We've supported each other more formally in the work. But more importantly, over the last couple of years, I think we've become life cheerleaders of each other, and we've brought some of the bigger topics to our table, if you will. And I just want to appreciate you for kind of the diversity of support and friendship that you've offered me. So thank you so much, Paige.
Oh, the feeling is very mutual.
So before we dive in, tell us about your day today.
Today, as in today,
Yeah.
today?
Yeah. Today.
All right. I am coming off the Beyonce concert, and so I'm riding that wave real high. I feel I'm stepping into my diva personality, as she would say. And,
is that still glitter in your hair that I can see?
There is absolutely still glitter in my hair. If we're lucky, it'll sparkle.
I love that.
Yep. So, and now I get to sit down and have a really fantastic conversation with you. I know we were talking a little bit about what do these things mean, and
yeah.
I'm really excited to share specifically how I've been able to blend my career in teaching yoga to all different audiences, you can say, and then also how that shows up and is incorporated in my daily life in the corporate world as well, because it's really hard to divorce the two. It's definitely a package deal for the better, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that. And that's, so the reason why we thought you'd be great to begin this discussion on embodied leadership, because aside from any formal definition, one of the things that we've seen is that some of the best leaders are now the most well-rounded. Leaders that maybe don't have such a deep and siloed expertise in a certain area. Those leaders that have played different roles at different organizations. And in your case, leaders who can bring the outside in, as we call it, bring a lot of what makes them unique as a human, as somebody who has, passions and experience outside of their domain, if you will. And bringing that in to really inform and influence the way that you lead people. So maybe we'll start there. I want to get into a little bit of the connection between yoga and your style of leadership. But let's start with this term, embodied leadership. I know we've been hearing it a little bit more in and out of different discussions. We've been really starting to add some definition to what does embodied leadership really look like, and how is that different from formal or executive leadership? What are your thoughts, Paige, as you hear this term embodied leadership? How would you define it?
Well, I'll start first by saying I really wanted to Google it or put it into ChatGPT, but I didn't, because I was like, I want to be authentic with my response. And so I did not do that. And instead, I was really sitting with it in my heart of hearts, right? To kind of think about, you might even say meditate on it. What does that mean to me when I even just think of the words, right? Like the embodied part. And you have to kind of unpack that, in my opinion, because there's body in there. There's like a wholeness that is brought to the table when you have this embodied approach, right? It's the human element, it is the heart element, and then it's also fully stepping into that role of leadership, right? And leadership then is the other side of this, where many folks have experienced different types of leadership. But when you couple that with embodied leadership, it's something where you see someone, something as holistic, right? It's not just a narrow lens in which we approach problems or approach people or projects that we're working on. And so to me, if I were to boil it down, embodied leadership is, as an individual leader, showing up authentically, making sure, to your point, like my side is right, I've got the right energy, I'm looking forward, and then I can bring that and hold that space for whomever I'm working with, so that together I can lead them maybe down that path to embodied approach, or even just help them open things up. So if I kind of summarize that, embodied leadership is authentic, whole, human.
I love that. Authentic, whole, and human. Let's put a pin in that. The other thing that I heard you say as well that I loved is bringing in more of the mind and the heart as well too. One of the things that we've been really starting to understand as we work with more embodied leaders, if you will, is that embodied leaders understand that leadership is an experience in itself. And embodied leaders will bring that experience forward as a way to invite people into more of a human experience. And when I say human experience, I mean a human working experience, right? Yeah. So it's a little bit of this dismantling of the filters that we place on who we are as leaders and how we show up for our teams. Yep. You know, it's not putting on the veil of perfection, or you know, the armor, if you will, of, you know, tough as nails, resilient. Embodied leadership is accepting, understanding, and honoring the fact that leading teams and leading organizations itself is an experience, and we have an opportunity to invite people into that experience by showing our own sense of authenticity. And that's something that I've noticed and experienced with you, Paige. And I'm wondering, you know, as you look at, you know, your career path and now playing a leadership role in a commercial organization, how specifically has embodied leadership like shown up for you? You know, what does that look like for you when you're working with your team or when you're working with stakeholders within an organization? What are some of the different things you're doing?
That's a really fantastic question, one. And it is a different approach. I think underneath this like definition of embodied leadership is, and I've thrown out the word authentic too, is being true to myself, right? Like knowing who I am and what I bring to the table, and stripping away that veneer and saying like, look, I'm not perfect, but what's great about that is we all have strengths, right? We can all contribute something. And as soon as we can define those and bring those to the table, suddenly we have this melting pot of amazing humanness that comes together to create a collaborative, inviting, warm experience. Whether or not things are working exactly as they should, we have that chance. It gives us space to, I love the term fail forward, right? Like we're all going to come together. We're all going to do these things. I'm at a startup. It's a constant iteration of everything. And by holding this space and creating that within myself of like, hey, I know I'm not perfect. I'm not going to get it right. Keep me honest. Like own those things that maybe what I've seen in my career with some leaders where they have a weakness, and rather than acknowledging it and being open about it, they put that like bar around it that is limiting. And instead I'm like, look, y'all, this is not like my strength. This is your strength. I'm here to create the space so we can bring those together. And there's something really amazing about being able to just be so open of like, here's your strength. Here's your strength. Here's my strength. Here's what I'm not good at. And now suddenly people feel more willing to jump in and collaborate and just try things versus like I've been on the other end of the spectrum where I've had leaders, they're like, it has to be right the first time, the only time, there's no room for error. And what that does is it shuts people down. And so anytime I'm stepping in to work with anybody or any project, that's the number one thing I want to bring to the table is we're all here, we're doing amazing things, we're intelligent human beings with diverse experiences that we're bringing to the table, right? Because what I bring to the table is vastly different than somebody else, and I want to honor that. So I think when I'm entering these spaces, that is the number one setting for me.
Yeah.
Is like, let's just be human first and foremost and celebrate that, because that's when our most powerful and potent work can take place.
Yeah, I so appreciate that. What I'm hearing from you is this embodied leadership almost starts with a sense of humility, and that's something that I've experienced with you. I think it's very unique, in your style, Paige. You're the type of leader that is quick to lead with that sense of authenticity and admit when something is maybe not your strength, which does a couple things. Of course, it creates safety in the environment, right, for folks to be able to make mistakes themselves, and as well, like, frankly, more quickly allows you to organize the people that maybe do have a strength in an area where you are weak. So, embodied leadership kind of starting with that humility, I think, is a really good point. I also think there's an interesting balance sometimes, because I think, some would say you can't have too much humility, but at the same time, we don't want to have so much humility that we're just constantly almost like apologizing or apologetic. So it might be this really nice balance of like leading with authenticity and humility, understanding when something's not your strength, but also knowing when to come in and set direction and provide direction for folks in a way that, is you step into your confidence. It's that balance of both that makes up the leadership experience. And the leadership experience embodied is what we're after here.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious, as you think of this term and some of the level setting that we've done, what have you maybe learned from some of the past leaders that you've worked with that most informs your leadership today? Things that you've really modeled from some past leaders that have been really successful, and maybe some things that you feel like you didn't want to take with you.
Yeah, I'll start with kind of some things that I keep in my bag now. And actually, you're one of the leaders that I often filter through, because I'm like, what would Anthony do? You're very formative in my young career. And even since then, I've been really grateful to have a couple of other folks who actually, before this term embodied leadership, actually wore that, right? Who I was able to feel a connection with them, like they cared about me as an individual first, and the rest is secondary. And I think as humans, when we are in a work environment, if we can feel seen and heard and cared about, it's almost as if the rest of it takes care of itself, right? It's like if we can have this really solid foundation of a human to human connection built on trust, then when it gets to the hard things and you've got to have those accountability conversations or even development conversations, because we have this deep foundation of I know you care about me as a person first, those are so much easier. And that is why I keep that near and dear and close by. That sometimes I've been in my role now for 6 months, and some of the folks are reporting into me. Our first one-on-ones, I just wanted to talk to them as humans. And I couldn't help but observe that all they wanted to talk about was the work. And I was like, nope, we're not doing that. That's not what we're here for. I want to know about your kids and your activities and where you summer for vacation. Because those things matter the most, right? And then on the other side of this, I've also worked with leaders who are only about the work. They have those really strong boundaries. And frankly, I was quite similar earlier in my career. I felt like I had to have this facade of like, I'm only work, I'm only business, almost robotic, where perhaps because I feel like I lead a little more emotionally, it's so hard for me to connect. And what I find within that, it's hard to pull out the why of why we're doing certain things, right? I love to see a big picture and understand what we're building to and where we're going. But when we have such rigidity, it almost feels like there's not a moment to zoom out and maybe look at it from another perspective. And I feel like that stunts the ability, like the agility to move forward and grow, because that foundation of trust isn't quite there. And it's not that you don't inherently trust, right? But it's a deeper well to draw from, where you're like, yep, I know they've got the right thing in mind. I know we're going to do this. It's almost like operating from a blank slate or a really shallow well. So I think those are kind of the two different things that I've experienced in my career from people who are whole and authentic and bring that, versus this monotonous, like, keep going, do this. And you just feel like a little burnt out. Actually, it brings that burnout piece to it, where you're like, what is the purpose, right?
We're talking about embodied leadership here on the Navigating Now Roundtable series. We're with Paige Galster. She's the head of sales enablement and operations at Stork Club. We've been doing a little bit of defining of terms, this concept of embodied leadership, and we've identified a couple of things. One, it starts with authenticity and humility. Modeling that invites people in. Two, it involves working with folks in a way that appreciates and understands and acknowledges, their entire self, both in and outside of work. If there's a third component, I want to try to name it, and then I want Paige, you to maybe add to it, because it's something that we've been talking a lot about as a team. And frankly, it's something that I've recognized in a few leaders that I work with on a day-to-day basis. And we've been able to call it out and say, that is embodied leadership. And that is when we can be standing in the center of the work that we love to do the most, with the highest level of confidence and command, feeling the most supported to then pour out, this practitionership into, whether it's, in our case, our learners, our customers, maybe even our teams. So it's when you've got the utmost level of confidence. And oftentimes, when I've been able to acknowledge this with some of my friends that I've seen truly embodied in their leadership, it's when they're in the right environment. It's when they've got the right people supporting them, when they truly feel supported. And when they are speaking to or doing the work that they are absolutely put on this earth to do. And I'm curious as to, when you think of that embodied leadership, and I have a feeling you'll probably call on your experience as a yoga teacher here. What does that feel like for you to have total command in work that you love to do?
Yep. You're right. Yoga, of course, immediately comes to mind. The word that comes in, and no pun intended here, the word that comes to mind is flow, right? There's this concept of, like, when you are in the zone, right? And things just, it's almost like an outer body experience. It's not even you. It's this constant just flow of, I'm in it. The time doesn't exist anymore. People are getting these downloads from you, right? You're receiving downloads from the energy. That to me is like when you are in flow. Of course, in yoga, we are practicing flow. So that is very connected there. But it isn't just you. It's so much more that's surrounding you, right? It's the years, to your point, of practitionership. It's the years of learning and development that have gone into that. And it's that really sweet spot when they all coalesce together. And it just streams through. And that happens while teaching yoga classes. They're typically an hour long, and there's like the warm up and then cool down. But when you're in it, you don't have to think about the things, right? You don't have to think about the cues. You don't need to think about whether you're zigging or zagging. It just kind of happens on its own. I've also experienced that in leading coaching workshops, where sitting in rooms with leaders who maybe they're newer leaders, or maybe they haven't really pulled back enough to understand how to motivate their teams. And we start to unpack these pieces, very similar to embodied leadership. Because in my opinion, to be a strong coach, you need to be embodied before you enter those relationships and situations. You've got to have your table right first before we can open up or invite other people to our table. And that happens even in those workshops too, where it's like, let's start with ourselves. Let's get our energy right. Let's get our purpose aligned. And then all of a sudden, our ability to dig and ask questions and draw things out from the people we're surrounded by, you feel that flow moment because it's a human connection and exchange.
Yes. You just landed on the point that I love the most from you today, which is, you know that you are embodied when you feel a true exchange between you and your team, you and your customers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can all, we've used this term practitionership left and right, the work that you love to do most. It's one thing to have practitionership. It's another to feel truly embodied, which means there's this open channel exchange between you and who you're interacting with. And I think that's maybe what has set, myself and Norm off when we are in a room and a leader is truly stepping into their embodied leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Again, they feel supported, they feel in command, and they feel like there's a true two-way exchange between them and who they're interacting with. And that's a really unique combination that does not happen, in your everyday 10-15 check-in meeting as a leader, right?
No.
At the same time, it also doesn't need to happen, with you in the center of a yoga studio or in the center of a keynote stage. So, how do we find sips and moments of this embodied leadership? I think it's what we just talked about. You create a safe environment, you lead with humility, acknowledge that we're all having a human experience and we're all here together. And you encourage a little bit of the two-way dialogue. And that can happen in a one-on-one, right? What are your thoughts on that? Just in terms of kind of day-to-day sips of embodied leadership, how can we get more of it?
I think once you feel it, it's a little, you want more, right? It's a thing. Yeah. Like you constantly strive to reach that again. And for me, when I've been able to find this, particularly in a corporate setting, because it feels a little more natural in a yoga environment, people are open in different ways. But in a corporate setting, I think allowing the folks that we are interacting with to know that I genuinely have their needs in mind. Like I genuinely want to see the folks around me rise and grow and prosper. And that comes through when we have our interactions, in the questions that we ask, in the way that we gently nudge to that next level. And I think, again, I've used this term, like get your own table right first, right? That happens through meditation, through walks, through reviewing and retros, right? Of like, how did I show up in those experiences to create that? Right? Because if I've had a bad day, my toddler's throwing a tantrum, and then I get into a one-on-one and I feel frazzled, I don't have that person's best interest in mind. I'm still reeling from my own things. But if we can take a moment as leaders, quite literally 30 seconds, do a quick breath work exercise, right? Maybe even just close your eyes for a moment, clear the slate, and then show up with this genuine interest in the people that we are working with, that sets that tone to then very quickly hop into these flows that we can find to pull that out from folks.
I love that. I mean, you're speaking to very specific day-to-day practices that we can put forward as a leader. And a lot of times that's creating, space at the front or the back end of an interaction, really truly expressing your appreciation, your vested interest in others. These are the, and not to unpack another term, but these are the wellness practices that we want to bring into our environment. And that is so far from, chipping in to have a team breathwork session over a Thursday lunch, or, giving people a discount to their local gym. These are small practices that as leaders we can install into our everyday interactions. And that's what allows folks to experience us as truly authentic individuals. And that's, embodied leadership. It can be found in the day-to-day practices. As we kind of round things out, Paige, first and foremost, thanks for geeking out on me or with me on embodied leadership. This is, it's such a new term. And I don't think you or I want to be quick to truly define it, but I think we've talked about a couple of key ingredients that might
Yeah.
set the stage for a broader discussion. What you wear a lot of hats. I know that you're very passionate about yoga as a practice and also as a big part of your career. How has yoga influenced the way that you lead on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, it's really hard to divorce the two, right? To our point, as an embodied leader, that is such an integral part of who I am and what I bring to the table, that we were just talking about breath work, or these little moments of like being authentic and holding space. It is not uncommon in all of my one-on-ones for me to either say a mantra or have a breath work exercise that we do, just to help center and ground the folks that are around me. And I think that's probably where my yoga world and my corporate world come together, especially in a corporate space or even a fast-paced environment, right? That ability to center and almost be the calm in the midst of the storm that's happening around is probably the practice that keeps me the most open and the most grounded. And when that doesn't happen, I feel it, my folks around me feel it, but we have these tools that we can continue to draw upon and settle in so that we can remember we're doing really great things, even if this particular moment might be really challenging. So I think that's probably where I bring the two worlds together.
Well, what I love about that answer is it's not that you're bringing kind of the tactical aspects of yoga into your leadership. You're bringing more of the mindset, and allowing your experience in yoga to bring the mindset in very authentically. That's, again, one of the ways that I've experienced you, and I'm sure your teams have as well. Paige, before we go, because this has been an incredible discussion, are you ready for a quick lightning round?
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, and these are going to be completely off the cuff. I don't even have them planned, so it's a lightning round for me as well too. One word to describe the Beyonce concert last night.
Unreal.
Ooh. I got to stop. I want like follow-up questions, but I got to stop there. Unreal. I've heard that left and right. What's your favorite yoga position? Like if you
handstand.
Oh, okay. That's it. Okay.
Yeah.
Like if you had to spend an hour doing one thing, it would be handstands.
It would do handstands. And this actually, it relates directly to our conversation. When you are balancing your whole body on your hands, the level of presence that is required, you cannot be thinking about the grocery list or the conversation you had. You have to be in this moment, here and now. Otherwise, you're coming right out. So you won't be able to maintain that. And that's why I continue to come back to a handstand practice as my practitionership, right? To embody who I am, what is important. Because when you remove all those other distractions, you're left with what's most important for handstand.
Ooh, I love that. Like what is our proverbial handstand? Like as a leader, what can we do every day that challenges us to focus on only what's the most important? I love that. I love that. That was far from a lightning round answer, but I will take it because it required more. Thank you. Last night was a full moon. Did you see it? Wait, was the full moon like above the Beyonce concert?
Yes, it was. It was a moment to be had.
I can just imagine. Did she call it out at all?
Blue moon over Beyonce. She didn't, but I'm sure she had a lot of things going on.
I just would think that like Beyonce would somehow like massively incorporate that into the production, but maybe she was just like letting it be. I love that. So, with the full moon, it's a time for renewal, a time for rebirth. So maybe the question here is, what are you calling into this next season of your life or your career?
Yeah. Wow, that's a really good one. Not a lightning answer.
It never is with us.
I would say calling in is stepping into more and leaning more into embodied leadership and trusting it, right? I think we all as leaders, good leaders, often second guess, are we showing up in a way that creates that space, that continues to enrich the lives of the folks that we are influencing? And so if, for me, the more I can sit in that and the more I can reflect upon it, right? Because when you move and don't take that opportunity to look back, we just continue doing the same things. We autopilot a little bit. And so I've had some instances lately where I've been called upon to pause and reflect in the way that I'm showing up. And man, those moments are powerful. So that's what I'm hoping to do, is to create more time to pause and reflect.
Yeah, and continue to stand in your confidence.
Mhm.
If there's anything I know about you, that's something that you'll always be focused on. And if there's anything else that I know about you, you're not going to fake the funk about it. You're going to be real. And that's something that I so appreciate about you. I know your community does, and the entire Navigating Now community as well. I think this is your third or fourth time on the show. And Paige, again, I want to thank you for your time, for your partnership, for being a big part of who we are here at Thoughtium. I will never forget episode 1 of this podcast. Well, it wasn't called Navigating Now, 6 years ago, but episode 1 was shot in the back conference room of an organization you were working for, and it was my first client, still an incredible client of ours, and I had no idea what I was doing. No idea. And the last
I think we had 3 cameras set up.
Oh my gosh. And the last thing I wanted to do at all was to call on my first client for any type of support or advice. But thankfully I was put in touch with you very early on in the client relationship. And I knew that this was something that you could support me with, and you did. And I just remembered that, you were a part of the literal first 5 episodes of this entire series. So thank you.
It's a very fun journey that we've been on together. I'm
really
very proud of your progress and to see how you've evolved.
Yeah, likewise. Something tells me this is maybe chapter 2 or 3 of a long, incredible story. Paige, thank you again for joining us. We so appreciate your time here today, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
It's always great.
All right. So thank you not only to Paige for joining us today, but we also want to thank our entire community for stepping into today's discussion. What a great discussion on embodied leadership. I hope those folks that have been able to stop by on the LinkedIn feed, or maybe you're tuning in on our website or YouTube, are starting to think about, what does embodied leadership mean for you? How would you identify embodied leadership? And maybe more importantly, when have you as a leader felt truly embodied? And we'll leave you with that question, because next week and in a few of the following weeks, we're going to be having more discussions about this term embodied leadership, both continuing to define it and then also talk practically how this looks and what this looks like on a day-to-day basis. So I couldn't be more thrilled about this discussion, and we hope that you all are excited about it as well too. You can find today's episode and all episodes of the Thoughtium Navigating Now Virtual Roundtable series on our website, thoughttium.com/live. We go live every Thursday afternoon at 3 p.m. Central. We look forward to seeing you all on the next one next Thursday. Have a great long weekend. Talk to you soon.